Traveling the Vortex.
Join the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and crash landed at episode 573, where we're just now realizing the mavity of the situation. Alons, as idiots say, I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn. How's everybody doing this week?
Getting over a cold.
Uh-oh.
Aw.
Yeah.
It's not good.
That's no good.
It's that time of year, though.
It's on the other end of it, though. Poor Gemma has a really bad cough and is having taken antibiotics to try to take care of it.
That's what I was going to ask, if you were passing it on to your little ones.
No, they were passing it on to me.
Oh. You guys do anything, watch anything, listen to anything, read anything?
I finished a book, as I want to do often. I read Star Wars Crimson Climb, which is the story of Kira during the events of Solo as she climbs the ladder of Crimson Dawn.
Oh, okay.
It was good. I really liked it. I think it left things kind of in a place where I think I needed to have read more of the comics of what they've done post-Solo to understand what they were setting up. Either that or they were just setting up a sequel, and I just didn't quite understand that either. But the rest of the ride going through it was really well done. Same author who did all the Padme books and the Ahsoka book. So she's got a good track record, and this is another good installment in that kind of series.
I'm genuinely hoping we still get another Solo movie that focuses on the underworld crime syndicates in the Star Wars universe. I don't think we will, but
Well, if not a film, we might get a series.
They did a whole line of comics on it, War of the Bounty Hunters, which I haven't read either. But I think the series would be really interesting because I didn't realize it. I'm sure they established it in the comics that Maul wasn't the head of Crimson Dawn. He was in charge of everybody. The Hutts, the Pikes, the ones that were from Shadows of the Empire.
Oh, Shizor's Black Sun?
Yeah, Black Sun. He was literally pulling the strings on everybody, which I thought was a really cool reveal, and they could definitely explore more of that somewhere.
Yeah. What about you, Sean?
no, not really. Like I said, it's been kind of a quiet week. I've had a ton of work keep me busy, and all of the things that I watched were pretty much podcast related, so I can't talk about them yet.
Me too, for the most part, although I did get an audio listen to. I'm going to review Doctor Who Decades Collection 1960s, 70s, and 80s, which is another grouping. Keith, a couple of weeks ago, did the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s collection. And so we kind of split this up, and I did the first part. He got his done before I did, but so that's going to be my Something New 2-minute review. All right, well, it's split up into 3 different books, each for a different era. The first one is called Imaginary Friends, and it's probably the best of the 3, showing my hand here, but it's about a little boy that keeps having dreams, and in these dreams, he's in the adventures with the Doctor. He starts with the first Doctor, and he's having these adventures with the Doctor and Susan, Ian, and Barbara. And so he's essentially there, but he's not there because they don't see him. They're not aware that he's there, but he's aware of everything that they're doing and their adventures. And then during the day, he has to sort of process this. And the way that he processes it is he, is drawing pictures or making stories. And of course, he's getting in trouble at school because he's making up these stories. But his mom, who's a very sympathetic person to his plight, is very helpful, and she ends up getting him a bear called Dr. Bear, and Dr. Bear is kind of his way to associate what he's experiencing in these dreams. And I won't go any further than that because the gimmick and the reason why it's happening is really cool. But it's just such a wonderful story. The second one's called The Cradle, and it's about a girl named Seema and her. I like to call this one the Magic School Bus because they end up on this blue school bus that ends up being kind of this. It's sort of trapped them there, and they have to sort of figure out how to get out. The 12th Doctor shows up and kind of helps them work through what this is and where they're at. I thought the story is a little bit slow paced, and I think that's to its detriment, but it was a good story as well. The last one, and I thought I would like this one best because it has the 4th Doctor and Romana, and it's called The Self-Made Man. And it's about this genius kid whose father had found a piece left over from the Cybermen from the invasion in the underground. He worked in the underground and or in the sewers, I suppose.
Bob returns.
Yeah, the sewers. Anyway, he ends up with this tech, and I can't go any further without giving things away, but it starts out as this mystery of these people that are mysteriously dying. And so that's about as much as I can say about that. Again, least favorite of those, but all three of the stories are definitely worth a either read or a listen to. And that's my Something New 2-minute review.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space, in a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson,
Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse on shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to Traveling the Vortex.
We are going on a journey, a very long journey, through the world of the Target novelizations in publication order. Every week, we are looking at a new book, talking about Terrence Dicks, Malcolm Hulke, and all our Doctor Who novelization friends. Whatever you do, keep turning the pages. This is Jason Miller of the Doctor Who Literature Podcast, a member of the Direction Point Podcast Network, and you are listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
Well, should we talk about news?
Yes. An official Doctor Who podcast has released following each episode of the specials, which features bits with Russell T. Davies and hosted by Juno Dawson, Tyrell Charles, and Crystal D.
And Juno Dawson, of course, she was the writer on Doctor Who Redacted, and Crystal D is a YouTuber, Doctor Who YouTuber, and I'm not familiar with the other guy, but I think he's been affiliated with Doctor Who media as well. So
he's according to the official press release, he's a pop culture TikToker and movies podcaster.
Ah, okay, so there you go. Yeah, the other two I had known
He's
previous.
been doing stuff for a long time.
Yeah, oh yeah. The other two I knew previously, but I wasn't aware of him, so I hadn't listened to or watched anything he's done. So, got a chance to listen to the first one. I enjoyed it. It's kind of a nice little inside look to some of the. Actually, it's kind of an inside look into Russell's mind because they do the little cutaways to these little Russell statements, and then they talk about what he says. And for the most part, they talk about it's more like a review podcast for them, and they talk about elements of what happened and things like that. So it's kind of what we're doing. We just don't have Russell on the podcast yet.
Yeah. Yet. No. I was a little surprised it was more of a review type podcast as opposed to more detailed talking to the cast and crew type podcast. Most of the official ones tend to be that way.
Well, I kind of wondered if maybe they were trying to stay. I think what they're doing is they're trying to move into. How do I say this? I think they're trying to move into our lane. I mean, not just us. I'm talking Doctor Who podcasters in general. I think
podcast lane.
They realized that they've gone for 17 years, 18 years without having an official podcast, and so everybody else has been doing it. So now they think they're finally getting on board with an quote unquote official one, which is fine. I think that's great. I don't disperse them anyway, because I think that, the more voices out there, the better, even if they're, official or unofficial voices. And I enjoyed listening to them. They had some nice little insights to what they thought about, particularly the episode. And then again, I liked hearing the little clips with Russell. And I think the reason they're not doing the more documentarian kind of thing exactly is because they would be competing with Unleashed, and I don't think they want to do that. So
yeah, I was just surprised by it, knowing what it's going to be like going forward. I don't think I'll have any issues with it. I was just thrown. It was just a surprise. Yeah,
right. And then our other piece of news.
Oh, Big Finish announced Old Companion is returning to Eighth Doctor's side.
Yay!
In a January 2024 story, the Sontarans versus Rutons audio drama series. So as if an old companion, being Kriz, wasn't enough to get us excited, a Sontarans versus Rutons audio.
Right. It's like a double whammy there.
Featuring Paul McGann and India Fisher, with Conrad Westmoss as Kriz. That's bound to be a win right there.
Mm-hmm. I find it interesting that Big Finish came along and they started doing Doctor Who stories with three of the previous Doctors, Peter Davison, not yet, eventually, Peter Davison, Sylvester McCoy, and Colin Baker. And they continued their adventures in between stories that already had happened. And so they were kind of fitting them in where they could, cleverly fitting them in. And Paul McGann comes along and he has all brand new stories because he's only has the movie. And here we are, 25 years later, and we're going back and inserting stories into Paul McGann's initial run, which I think is kind of cool.
With their own companions. I spoke a little wrong. It's not a box set. It's an individual story because it's going to be released in monthly parts between January and April, which weaves us through the lives of the 3rd, 6th, 8th, and War Doctors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool.
The cover art on it looks really cool, too, with the Sontarans and the glowing Ruton in the middle. Sean, you've been quiet. I thought you'd be super excited that Kriz is back.
Kriz is back. Yay, cool. Rutons. Yeah, cool. I mean, you're burying the lead there. Finally getting the Sontaran Ruton War. Are you kidding me?
The one that we haven't seen yet.
That's the news right there. No,
well,
I'm
we haven't done
excited.
Shakedown on the show yet, so maybe that might be a reason to put Shakedown on when we review that. We could do that with Shakedown.
All of a sudden, there's an opportunity.
Yeah, that's right.
They all say, who is Doctor Who?
This is Tim Trelaw.
This is David J. Howe.
I'm Peter Purvis.
I am Sadie Miller. This is Lauren Cornelius.
Larry, it's Fraser.
For all things in the Doctor Who collecting world and beyond, the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. I'm Larry Van Mersbergen, your host, and I've been collecting for 42 years. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex on the Direction Point Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Rupert Booth.
I am known as Paul Ferry.
And my name is Barry Williams.
Together, we host Time Ram.
Time Ram's a cruel mistress.
It's a random number generator.
That also.
We roll a number from 1 to 13, and that's our Doctor. Then 1 to 300 for the story, and then we ram them together.
Even if it doesn't make sense.
Cruel, I tell you.
Time Ram, putting the wrong Doctors in the wrong stories, so you don't have to.
You're listening to Traveling the Vortex.
All right, well, let's move on to our next bit, which is, I suppose, do we want to talk a little bit about An Adventure in Space and Time? Now, I haven't had a chance to see it, but we all are aware that they have done some edits to the one that they showed on the 23rd, a couple weeks ago. They showed and if for listeners that may not know, this is the William Hartnell docudrama starring David Bradley as William Hartnell, and it sort of talks about, it shows how he became the Doctor, and it's kind of a behind the scenes docudrama happening at the time of his tenure as the Doctor. And when this first aired back in, let's see, would have been 2013. At the end, it's no spoiler here, but at the end was as David Bradley's, as William Hartnell's filming his last story. There is a really nice moment where he sees a glimpse of the future, and he sees Matt Smith standing there as the Doctor, and it's sort of a glimpse into there's a lot of life, and he's passing on a legacy that's going to go on for a long time. And in this particular case, this time that they aired it, they edited that piece out and put Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor in. Well, presuming he's in there in the capacity of the Doctor, but they've put him in there, and so, which I think is really cool. If the other one was not still available out there, then I suppose there could be an argument that they're changing things for the sake of changing things. But I think it was a really, especially in an anniversary year. And Mark Gatiss, who wrote the story, has said that they shot that scene so they could insert pretty much any Doctor they needed to in there. So it was, at least if he's, being truthful about it, that was something that he had some foresight about anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it was pretty cool that they did that, especially because it advances that idea that not only in 2013 had it gone 50 years and continued from that initial series that Hartnell did, but now it has gone an additional 10 years, and we're in the 60th anniversary, and there's even more monumental changes that are happening within the show. Mm-hmm. And I think that serves as a example of the how long lasting his service has been to the show.
I think it's a nice touch to change it. I did watch the clip of it on YouTube and thought it was pretty nice. The ironic thing is, the night before, I had actually just popped in my Blu-ray and watched it.
Oh, is that right? So you'd watch the one with Matt.
Yeah, and then turn around the next day or the day after and found out, oh, look, they did a bit with Ncuti. That's kind of cool. So I have not either gone back to rewatch it again to see the full thing in context, but the YouTube clip that they posted, Ncuti did a nice job, and it was pretty nice.
Yeah.
I also watched the clip, and I agree that I think it's very cool and timely that they're able to, drag this back out and insert new Doctor here. I will say it felt just a little hollow when Ncuti showed up, but I think more than anything that's because we had already seen Matt Smith in action when the 50th rolled around. We knew what kind of Doctor he was going to be. We had, grown to love him. And so
we were about to say goodbye to him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for him to show up in that capacity was suddenly this kind of extra little, twang on the heartstrings, versus Ncuti showing up feels more like a promotional stunt, just because we at this point, he's just a face and not a character, because we don't know what kind of Doctor he's going to be. I will totally eat these words once we get a couple of seasons of Ncuti, and then I'll go back and watch that clip and go, oh yeah, totally. Now he fits, but for right now it's just a okay.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying, but I don't think it matters what his performance of the Doctor is. I think the idea is that the performance has transcended so many different people. It's transcended so many different, now genders and now race. And so I think that it's more, no matter how he portrays the Doctor, he is the next Doctor. And I think
not so much as portrayal, but just the fact that
it doesn't have the emotional impact because,
right. Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah, I suppose.
With Matt Smith, I had a couple of years to get to know him and to care about him and become attached to him, and then to see him show up, and there was that added emotional impact. Versus Shooty, where the excitement's there, but I'm not necessarily invested yet.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
What's also interesting is that they had to edit out some of the dialogue from An Unearthly Child because of of that whole drama that's going on there.
Which, neither here nor there. I'm
Hopefully
sure
they can put it back in.
Yeah, right.
For future
Eventually.
iterations.
That's just funny.
Well, speaking of William Hartnell and the First Doctor, our first review this week, we will be getting to the special very soon, so just hang tight, listeners. But we did get a chance to watch the Daleks in color. And while we're not necessarily going to review the Daleks again, we are going to talk about the changes that were made to this in order to make it a shorter, faster paced, more omnibus version of the story. Keith, you want to go first?
I liked the colorization. I did not like the editing.
Really?
I thought it at times it almost made the story harder to follow. There were a lot of jumps and things that were cut that I was like, well, wait. Especially like as monotonous as some of it was, Susan going back to the Daleks village or city after going to the TARDIS to get the drugs and stuff. All of a sudden, snap, she's back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, whoa, what? They're all of a sudden talking about the girl. I'm like, wait a minute, what girl? Oh, Susan's back. It was very abrupt and very kind of jarring. And then feels like they cut so much of the Thal stuff out of it that I don't have any emotional investment in their characters and don't care about them anymore. They're almost a footnote to the story, the way they cut it together, in my opinion.
I agree, but they cut enough of that out too that I think that it didn't matter, because I think what it did well was it put in that respect, I think it put more of the focus on the Doctor and the companions, which I liked about it, because it didn't feel, the Daleks has always felt like two halves of a story or two different stories. We've got the story of the travelers showing up, exploring the city, being captured, and having to escape. And then the second half is them meeting the Thals and helping the Thals get the food they need, because theirs is very scarce. So it's always felt like two different adventures in a way. And part of that's because it's such a long story. I think by cutting the Daleks part of, not the Daleks, the Thals part of this, I think for me worked a little better, because if you're going to get rid of anything, get rid of that second chapter, because really all that matters as far as telling this story is, or telling a Doctor Who story, is more the focus on the Doctor and the companions, which I think works for me. So, and then there's still enough of that element when they do team up with the Thals, there's still enough of that element of the focus on the Doctor and the companions. But I understand. I can see what you mean. And I think one of the things that was the only place that I agree with you that it felt like it was cut up poorly, because she's suddenly back. And in fact, they have to rely on her explaining to the Doctor and the companions that she had two versions of the medicine, and they took one, but they let her keep the other one, after she had that whole conversation with the one Thal about doing that, to getting that medicine back in just in case. So I thought that was kind of a weird edit, a weird jump. But beyond that, I didn't have a problem with a lot of the edits they did. I felt like it really livened the pace of it. I think it moved it along. I don't think it lost a lot of story. I don't think there was edits that made it confusing. I think part of us coming to it knowing the original so well is we probably tend to miss the things, whether they were needed or not. We tend to miss them because it's more obvious to us what's missing, and it's more obvious to us what we know about the story. So that might be part of it too.
I thought it was ironic that they cut so much other stuff and left so much of the traversing the cavern and across the gap. the chasm as much as they did when they could have, because there's no references to the people they lost after they lose them,
Right,
you know,
right.
in the story.
Right.
So they easily could have just skipped a lot of that and have a little clip of them, a couple clips of them going.
Yeah.
And then popping up in the city, and it would have been fine, and they could have had time for more other stuff.
But I think that the reason why they did that is I think they focused on action. They focused on movement, and that's action and movement. Now, let's be fair. It was still a lot shorter than it was originally.
That's true. That's very true.
So I think that's probably what they were going for was action and movement to keep the viewer, especially a young viewer or a new viewer, or somebody that maybe has a shorter retention span than us. And so I think that I don't know how you can have a shorter attention span than me, but but I think that might have been part of the reason why they left that, because it is something happening, you know?
Well, what was also interesting was they added those clips sometimes when they were talking over, you know, cutaways or reminders of things that have happened in the past.
They'd show us flashbacks.
Obviously, that was to, you know, help those with the shorter attention span too, which I didn't really think was needed, but that's also because I know the story so well.
You know what I think also was done well is they would not too many times. I don't make it. I was about to say constantly, but it wasn't constant. But they did it effectively, where they would cut back to the two Daleks talking to each other and showing us on the screen and giving us a little bit of that exhibition while they were on screen. And I think some of that was even new dialogue between Briggs and, I cannot remember the name of the guy that voiced the Daleks in this, who both came and did some extra recording. But that was a way that they used to move the story along with just sort of some narrative without having to show us what happened. And I thought that was a clever way to do that. The color looked pretty good. Now, I really wish they would take some attention to upscale that video. What I want them to do is I want them to give some of this old video that they've, you know, run through VidFire, that they returned from the video or from the film quality to make it look like the video quality. I've always thought the VidFire process is great. I always thought they look good, but I think now they need to take that Peter Jackson approach, and I think they need to put that through some AI and even clean that up even more, because when you look at what they did with the footage for Get Back, with, you know, footage that wasn't, some of it wasn't even shot for the film that would have made it in the film, and they cleaned it up so nicely. I think that they could put a little extra attention, if you're going to go ahead and colorize it, put a little extra attention to clearing up some of those blurry lines too, because that was still a little distracting to me. Not so much when it was in black and white, because you realize that it's old, and maybe your brain kind of puts you in the mindset that this is old, you know, video that or old film that they've recovered. But when you put the color coding on it, suddenly my brain thinks, ooh, brand new. So when you've got some of those fuzzy scenes that are nicely colorized, then I'm kind of, they almost stick out to me. So if anything, I think they should have gone in, and maybe it's just not cost effective, but I kind of wish they had gone in and, you know, fixed some of those blurry scenes up.
Yeah, I had this same thought a couple of times that, oh, I wish this was a cleaner footage. And I don't remember it being this almost not necessarily bad, but this poor quality when it was in black and white.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say I think maybe our brains, we don't zero in on it so much because it's not in color. It's in black and white. So we expect it to kind of have some age to it. Sean, you're awfully quiet.
Insert Price is Right horn here. Wow. For something that I was so very hyped about, I came away from this so very disappointed. The initial reaction to the colorization was, wow, that looks really pretty good. I'm very impressed with that. Until they got into the Dalek City. And for whatever unknown reason, decided that the highlight colors of the city should be gold, which did absolutely nothing but bring out the wood grain of the walls. and it suddenly became plywood.
Really?
The magic of the Daleks is, from the first time I saw it to the last time I saw it, that is an alien city.
Yeah.
The fact that the doors are funky shaped, it does not look like something man-made. It looks like some alien race lives there. And I buy it. I buy it every single time I watch it because it's sterile. And they talk about the fact that there's no people around. And the black and white so lends to that because it looks like it's got metal floors. It looks like it's, it's all kind of gleaming shades of gray. And my brain buys it. And as soon as you put that gold hue on there, it looks like a plywood wall that the set, it suddenly became a set.
Huh.
And it just shattered the whole illusion for me. I didn't buy any of it.
I didn't notice that at all. I loved the idea that it had that gold sheen to it. And it was more of a trimming thing is what it was.
Yeah.
But I don't think I noticed any wood grain.
Yeah, no, it just popped for me. It was like, oh. And then the interiors with a lot of blue.
Yeah.
Which I think also is kind of a detriment to it because it suddenly, I guess there's an element of it that maybe makes sense because they went with the blue Dalek bumps, that model of Dalek. But Daleks have no interior design. They're not going to paint the floor blue and go, yeah, that looks good. They don't care. It's form over or function over form, and so making it and taking a page quite literally out of the Cushing movies with these kind of bright garish colors for the city, that didn't work for me. And it was like, I think I know where they were going for it. I think they were really trying to kind of lean into the Cushing aesthetic because they could, but it just, it was well done. It was all of the colorization was exceedingly well done. There was not a single moment where I felt like this was a Ted Turner.
They have finally gotten actors' teeth and eyes right so that they actually look white and not dirty.
But up beyond that, that's about the only nice thing I say about the colorization. The edit was worse. Oh my God. How can you take this 19-part story that 15 of those parts are jumping over this hole in the ground because it's action orientated and keep that part, but not, I get it. Again, I know where they were going to try and pick up the pace and shorten it up. This is a story that very easily could have been a 90-minute edit instead of a 75.
Yeah.
And that would not have hurt it. The rushing to get to the end with the new incidental music and this very 60s peppy jazz band James Bond.
It almost verges on almost a disco feel at some point.
And it was distracting. And and after the second or third scene where it showed up, it became annoying because it was almost overpowering the dialogue in some scenes.
Really?
Well,
I think we have decided that you have a poor sound mix for some reason.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we'll go with that.
I didn't notice it overpowering.
I didn't either.
I just was so devastatingly disappointed because it was like, oh, all right, this is going to be great. No, it was not. And I don't know. I suddenly thought about it that one shot of Barbara when she gets separated right at the beginning, the cliffhanger, and the thing comes at her. And then all of a sudden now it's not going to be a cliffhanger. And it suddenly dawned on me. It was like, how much of those kind of moments are we going to lose in these omnibus attempts? That these things that distinctly stick out in our brains are suddenly now just and next scene. And it just, as soon as that one happened, and it did exactly as I feared that it would, it was just kind of like, oh man, this is going to be a rough ride. It just didn't impress me the rest of the way through. And I think if this was, as you said, Glenn, we know what's missing. We can kind of go back and fill in the paintbrush, as it were. If this was somebody's very first introduction to the Daleks, I don't think they got it. I don't think they got the mysteriousness of Skaro and the intrigue and the real threat that the Daleks face or present, because it falls into the very silly running about, and then we get there and we've defeated them. Haha, that's the end of it. I don't know. I didn't like it.
I
did not like it.
Having teenagers and now a young adult kid, I think that they probably got everything that they were going to get out of that. And I had two kids that actually sat down and watched the entire series, and the Daleks is, to my detriment, is not their favorite story at all. And it is a lot of people's favorite story, but part of that is because they felt like it was too drawn out. They felt that the Dalek, now they haven't seen this color version. I haven't showed it to them yet, but they felt that the Daleks were very unimpressive in the original series. So I think that's the target audience for this shorter, quicker, faster paced, colorized version of this. And I think that's also why there's the energy and the excitement and the pep, pepping it up with the music. And obviously we're not the target fans. The nice thing is we still have the original. We can go to it and watch it at any time. So yeah. But and it's not just us here, because I've seen mixed reviews. There have been a lot of classic fans that have said almost word for word what you're saying, Sean, and pointing out a lot of the things that you said, Keith. But there's also on the other side, there's a lot of new fans that are saying, if they would do this to all of them, I could probably go back and watch them, because now it feels like a new, not exactly like a new Who, but it's the same length and pacing and things like that. So I've seen people on the other side of it saying, I could probably watch some more classic Who if this was the way they did it. So
I don't know. I feel like the editing, they kept all of the wrong stuff. It was like, well, I wouldn't have edited it that way, but okay.
Right.
And I get the people who, say that about how it feels like a newer story, and then they could watch it. Not everyone has the right word, the sensibilities or the taste to be able to go back and watch those older pieces of media.
Right.
Not everyone can handle it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we even
I'm glad there is something for them to at least watch it.
Right.
Well, and I mean, I'm used to it because growing up, I watched Universal monster movies all the time. So even some people can't even go into black and white and watch it. They just can't. It just blocks them completely. So
right.
I feel like I, at least even before we started the podcast, had that base, I don't know, skill. I don't know what the right word is, but I had that base that would allow me to appreciate the older stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes not appreciate the newer stuff because it's too fast paced.
Right. All right, well, let's move on to the thing everybody's been waiting for, and the thing that I've been waiting to review not just all day today, but since about 1:30 yesterday. The new episode, Wild Blue Yonder. You've got a synopsis for us, Keith?
I do. But before we get into it, do you want to read some?
No, do the synopsis first.
Okay, all right, never mind. I thought most of your feedback was Star Beast, not this.
No, it's all this.
Oh, okay, never mind then.
Yep.
The TARDIS takes the Doctor and Donna to the furthest edge of adventure. To escape, they must face the most desperate. I'm going to start over.
Okay.
The TARDIS takes the Doctor and Donna to the furthest edge of adventure. To escape, they must face the most desperate fight of their lives, with the fate of the universe at stake.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Well, before we do that,
absolutely.
And before we do our reviews, we did put out there on Facebook and Twitter, we asked people to let us know what they thought. So we're going to quickly read a few reviews. On our Facebook page post, Rick said, soaring old school Doctor Who reminiscent of Midnight and some of the very best Tennant era literary and audio Who as well. It was so cerebral and so weird. The early scenes felt like a Big Finish tale, and Tennant and Tate knocked it out of the park. Add "My arms are too long" to the long list of classic chilling lines alongside "Are you my mummy?" and "Hey, who turned out the lights?" Phenomenal. Brian said, I loved it. It's the kind of a cross between Midnight and Big Finish audio scherzo, which I agree with, even though I wasn't a fan of scherzo. A great little bottle episode that allowed Tennant and Tate to flex their acting muscles even further. Again, the added Disney money made a pretty epic spaceship for them to run about in, though some of the underground corridors were a dead ringer for the low budget ones on Red Dwarf. I give this another 10 out of 10, like the Starbees. And then, of course, there were some people that weren't so happy. Lisa said, probably going to be in the minority here, but I didn't care for it all. I hated the pace, the storyline, and I fell asleep watching. And Russ also wrote, well, having caught up on the second Doctor Who's 60th anniversary special with a huge disappointment, it was... what a huge disappointment it was to me personally. Oh, the performances were their usual high standards, and it looked great, but against all the hype and build-up that I was given, for me, it simply didn't measure up. The only storyline positives for me were the mention of the Hads, if you know, you know, and the all too brief appearance of the legend that was Bernard Cribbins. Overall, Wild Blue Yonder was most like my school reports could do better. And then over on the listeners forum, James wrote, it was good, but I enjoyed last week's special a little more. I think the episode was kind of a filler. I've been looking forward to the Toymaker special next week. And John said, absolutely loved it. The people that were upset about the lack of the past doctors and companions in this episodes must have already forgotten that this is exactly what it's getting right now. A past doctor, new and improved Donna, and even Wilf. And we can't keep focusing on the past. We have to move forward at the same time. Two strong stories so far, and I assume another one next week will bring casual fans back to the party, and hopefully they stick around for Christmas. The 60th specials are retrospective enough, but are mainly there to give the fans that left a jumping on point to rejoin, and that is what Shooty needs, a fair shot and an audience. And I can see where he's coming from there. And then real quick over on Twitter, Alex said, I've known for years that David Tennant is a great actor, but he really pulled out all the stops for Wild Blue Yonder. Phew, if only there was some kind of acting medal they could give him. Oh, well. And then Patty said, loved it, terrifying, bonkers, and brilliant. Wilf was the cherry on the cake. Superb television. So I want to thank those of you that responded and gave your input. And now we will give our input. I'm going to let Sean go first this time.
Yeah.
Wow. Just wow. Thought I knew where it was going based on a comment that we made on the podcast last time. And so I sat through, the first 35, 40 minutes of it going, okay, anytime now. Because I'm the smartest guy in the room. I know where this is going. And it didn't go there. Oh, okay. I am wrong. And I think the story was better for it. It became something completely different than what I thought I was expecting. And not that I would have been disappointed had it been that, but it just, I love that everybody's comparing it to Midnight,
mm-hmm.
because that totally is the vibe that I got from it. It just, I even commented, I said, this feels like Midnight. And everybody went, yeah. We watched it as a group after a very long day. It was probably about midnight 30 when we started this. And I was a little concerned that maybe people were going to nod off and fall asleep. Mel had a party Saturday night. And so she was inputting stuff into her phone and completing an order. And usually we'll watch TV and she's, on her phone, and she'll kind of do the occasional glance up to keep track of what's going on and then back to whatever she's working on. That lasted all of 5 minutes. before the phone sat in her lap, forgotten, and all of the attention was diverted. And that's kind of when I knew, okay, yeah, you know, if it won her over that quick, there's something really good going on. I loved just about everything about it. I loved the Hads making a return appearance. I loved the design of this creepy spaceship. The plot element of why everything was doing what it was doing. The absolutely confusing and yet very clever reveal that the doctor that walked in the room and is talking to Donna, and the Donna that walked in the room is talking to the doctor, all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is not a time thing. This is happening at the same time. One of the, these are imposters. Oh no. And just the, you know, my arms are too long. Yikes. Yeah, loved it.
I have to ask, what was it we or you said on the show last week where you thought it was going?
The poster, the poster image that appeared for this one,
with the robot in the background.
With the robot in the background, and
Jimbo.
I had made the comment like, did you guys notice the poster image was the TARDIS?
Oh, right, the little shattered edges of it. Yeah.
And so when they get out there into that long hallway and all of those pistons, which to my mind look very reminiscent of time rotors, I assumed that they had gotten folded into one of the interior dimensions of the ship while she was regenerating. And that's why the panels would flip every so often. And that the doctor just wasn't catching on. But about the time they got to the cockpit and none of it was written in High Gallifreyan and he didn't understand the language, I was beginning to go, well, maybe not.
See, once the had stuff happened, okay, we're not doing a bottle episode in the TARDIS. Yeah. Somewhere else.
Yeah, as soon as the TARDIS disappeared. What'd you guys think of the pre-credit sequence with them crashing in the tree?
That was funny. And it makes me wonder what he's setting up, because obviously it's something that he's establishing moving forward, because the Mavity thing stuck around. It wasn't a one-off thing where, he eventually gets to realizing that's the word gravity. It now has changed somewhat, kind of the past.
Yeah, I wondered myself if it was something that they're going to allude to later, or if it really just was a running joke. I suppose we'll find out next week. But part of me almost thinks they're just going to drop it.
Joke.
Yeah, part of me thinks they're just going to drop it.
Like for the next 10 years of Doctor Who, it's Mavity. You know,
you want it to keep being a running joke.
I want it to be that, you know me, I flog dead horses. I want this to be a thing where they did change history and we're stuck with it now.
Obviously, at the end, though, he says gravity and then has to correct himself so Donna understands it. So that's something that makes me also think that
the Doctor obviously is
going to be readdressed.
Yeah, the Doctor's obviously somewhat aware that there's a change there. So
I want every black hole to be a Mavity well. Yes.
I think that scene is, although there is still some comedy in this episode, that scene I think was purposely done in order to, because that's really our first and only gag in the whole thing, because it does get very deep and dark, and there are some funny lines that are said, but we don't have that upbeat, fun Doctor Who that we sometimes get in our stories, and it gets really heavy. And so I think it was well done and well placed, because I think it was okay, here's your little light humor before we really delve into something that's going to be very dark.
But the darkness and everything in it is so well done.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I mean, I would say balanced, but I mean, it's there. It's the whole time. There's not really a lot of light and lifting you up and then going back down to dark. But it's so well executed and so well thought out every single step of the way that I didn't miss the humor and the normal Doctor Who-ness, because it was such a good kind of, it goes to that serious dark place that Doctor Who sometimes does, and it did it so well that I was just sucked in the whole entire time.
I also like that they don't gloss over the stuff that happened in Flux, particularly, and I think it's even more powerful when he's talking about he's the reason why, half the galaxy or half the universe is gone. And here he blames himself, even though it wasn't his fault. She says it's not your fault, but all of that. But then when he gets into that corridor again, alone, and he just has that fit where he starts banging on the thing, because it's just the I don't want to. The weight of that, I think it's just I almost did it, but I thought that would be inappropriate.
The mavity of it.
Yeah, the mavity of it. But it just him dealing with that again, I thought that was really, really well done, but not heavy-handed either. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to shove this down your throat because this is still a thing in Doctor Who, and I'm glad it is. But I think they played it really, really well.
And what struck me while watching it was how Chibnall didn't have the 13th Doctor deal with the ramifications of it, really.
Right.
And now I'm so glad that Russell picked it up and started to work with it, because that is a huge thing that the Doctor needs to deal with, and we need to see them dealing with that. And the fact that we just kind of went on of, okay, we're having fun now. Oh, now the Master's up to some mischief, and we got to deal with that. It just, the mavity of what happened needed to be more import, and I think that was part of what the Sea Devil story didn't do right. Was it didn't have the Doctor kind of grappling, it had the Doctor running, and while the Doctor can run, they need to have the moments of dealing with what has happened in the past. That was one of the big reasons that elevated this entire story for me, was the connection to Flux and the ramifications impacting the Doctor emotionally.
Somebody on Twitter I saw had said that I wonder if we just witnessed the Ravenists' first encounter with this universe.
I don't know enough about the Ravenists, but
that was the two not Ravenous. What were the two from the Flux storyline? Weren't they called the Ravenous?
No, the Ravenous is Big Finish.
Oh, that's right. What were they called? Ravengers? What were they called?
Was the last story.
Vanquishers. Maybe that's what it was. Anyway, yeah. They said, did we just see how the Vanquishers entered our universe? Now,
that would be cool.
It would be wibbly wobbly, because obviously they're on the edge of the universe because of, at least it's implied that this is the edge of now the known universe because of the Flux. But it could have been a literal edge of the universe before the Flux, and he's just assuming that this is what it is now, and this is in the past, and this is how maybe. I mean, I just thought it was kind of an interesting take on that. I'm not sure that that's where they're going with it, but
they are Ravagers.
Ravager,
not Ravenger.
Ravager. Okay.
Yeah. That darn extra letter made me think you were talking Big Finish.
Well, when you said that, then I realized, oh, wait, yeah, those were in that story we listened to, and in a lot of Paul McGann that we haven't yet. So,
yeah. It's an interesting idea. That also means that the resolution, which I thought was great, doesn't really make a difference, and they die.
Right.
Or they don't die. So, I mean.
Right. I think that if I were to tick it off for anything that was a negative about it, is I did feel like some of the CG was a bit dodgy. I think that the ship looked great, but I think there were times that I could tell that they had been shooting against a green screen, and I don't like when I can notice that kind of thing. It wasn't enough to take me out of the story, but there were certainly moments where I was like, they're obviously on a sound stage. And I think that this is done this way. Somebody speculated that maybe this was done the way it was done because Russell was able to save some money and get a third special out of it. That maybe originally it would have been just 2 specials, but he could stretch it by doing something in the bottle. And then also I saw somebody remind me that, they shot this during COVID, so this is a great story to do in that case because it's just the Doctor and Donna. And for near the entire episode, it's just the 2. And so they wouldn't have had to been as stringent with COVID protocols, at least with their main actors in that case, because you wouldn't have a lot of actors without masks around each other. So I thought, and then I suppose that's pretty clever that they were able to do this. But yeah, that was one of my only nitpicks was the fact that I felt like the green screen was just a little bit dodgy.
Yeah, I had that thought a couple times too, but then the story wound up, and once they kind of got out of that main hallway, I didn't really think that as much. There were a couple times when the not things were the massive size. I was like, oh, okay, that CGI is a little dodgy, but
well, I think what
too bad.
I think what helped with those were they would also disfigure the forms because they weren't quite figuring out how to do shape, and so I think that kind of helped that dodginess because it was like it was almost part of the story.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm not sure who said it, but having Wilf show up at the end was the absolute cherry on top of the cake.
Yeah, absolutely. Now,
I feel better.
You guys understand, though, that that's the only scene that we get. That he's not in next week's episode. That was what they shot, and that's what they were able to use. Russell said in a statement today that they had written more. They had intended to use him more. And he came to the table read and everything was great. But then when they got on set, that was really kind of all they could do at that point. So, but I'm glad we got that. I'm glad we got what we got.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
Had a little tear in my eye when it happened.
Did you guys figure out that, when they said the door opened 3 years ago,
that somebody had left?
Somebody had left the ship.
I assumed that too. Yeah, I assumed the same thing. And I think they do a good job because they said the door had been open 3 years ago. And of course, there's nobody on the ship. So my first thought is to go to, whoever it was left the ship that way. But
either
they do
one person or everybody.
They do a good job with Donna, supposing that that must have been when they got in. And so I kind of then maybe sort of bought that maybe that was why the door was open so that they could get in, or that's how they got in. But then when it's revealed that it was the pilot that left because of that to keep keep them from figuring out what she done, then I was back to, okay, well, that makes sense that somebody left. Now, it doesn't explain how they got in initially, but.
No, and I didn't see why she had left. The fact that she had set up a self-destruct. I did not see that coming either. So I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, I totally thought as soon as they talked about the airlock, it was like, oh, somebody left the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're out there staring into the void, to my mind, it's a very easy leap to make that they couldn't handle it and they leaped. That they went nuts and opened the door and out they went.
I assumed that it was kind of like an Event Horizon type thing where somebody went mad on the ship and killed everybody by opening that airlock door.
And I wonder how much of the Event Horizon vibe is because of the long hallway.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's true.
I wonder if that just is immediately where our brains went because of the physical similarities to it.
Although, until I just said it, I hadn't actually connected Event Horizon.
Well, but I wonder if maybe it was subconscious.
But it had to have been.
Yeah. I definitely got it subconsciously. I kept thinking that. But yeah, you're right. Donna kind of cemented over that with that's how they got in.
Mm-hmm.
And so then my brain went and played with that for a while. It wasn't until the clunk. What is that? And I loved the whole standing there, the Mexican standoff, as it were, where they're standing on either sides of the partition. Just think, just don't think. Okay, calm. All right. Well, but what about this? Don't you do it?
Yeah.
And you could just see that he's like an F1 racer idling, and then all of a sudden somebody steps on the gas.
Yep. Yep. It was so in character too, especially with the way Tennant's always performed the character, and you could say that for any of the most recent Doctors, but specifically him pulling it off that way, I thought it was really really well done. And Donna sometimes is brilliant.
Oh, yeah. And he's the one who will call her that more often than she will.
Yeah.
Now, the ending. You've got the wrong one.
I like how he tried to write it off of, well, the wrist was just barely too big. No, he didn't know that.
Well,
until her reaction to being inside the TARDIS wasn't what he thought it was.
No. The TARDIS told him that was off, and that's what was on that display. Because you saw the little things light up, and it was the same coating that was on that ship, and that's when he turns around to her. And so the TARDIS is who tipped him off that this isn't Donna.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I gathered from that.
I could see that.
Moment.
Yeah.
Do we like that?
So what bothered me about it is that I've seen it twice, because I watched it once on my own, and then the girls were out today, yesterday at noon, and so they had to watch it later in the afternoon, so I rewatched it with them. And the first time I thought maybe I had just missed her explanation for why they called, was it
Mrs. Bean?
Yeah. And I thought maybe I just missed it, but because I couldn't figure out why he picked the other one. And then, so I listened very closely, and Donna still says something, and I don't even know. I mean, I know I heard it this time, but I can't remember now what she says, but it still seemed very nonsensical. And I thought that didn't seem like Donna, but then I thought, okay, well,
the answer
that's
the fake
why
Donna gave made more sense than the answer that the real Donna gave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
what did she say then?
The fake Donna said it just is.
Yeah.
Whereas the real Donna says something because it's a woman with the vegetable for a name.
Oh, is that what she said? Okay, so maybe I still missed what she said. Yeah. I thought it was both times I heard it, it sounded like her coming up with something. And I thought, okay, well, that's why the Doctor chooses the other Donna, because she sounds like she's making something up on the spot. And so maybe if I felt that way, I can justify why the Doctor felt that way too. But
I totally thought the same thing the Doctor did. But of course, throughout most of this, when they aren't sure of who the other person is, I wasn't either.
Yeah, yeah.
There were, except for the initial, once it kind of they reveal themselves. All those times where he takes off his tie and he puts it on the ground. That must be the actual Doctor.
Yeah, that sold it to me. I thought, that's a good idea, because now the other Doctor won't know and they won't have a tie. But boy, was that a great reveal when she says, "Where's your tie?" Where'd your tie go?
And I totally bought that it was Donna until she melted into a puddle.
And then he figures out, he goes, oh, so when it goes away, it still exists. And I thought that's how that kind of being would learn. And I thought that was so well presented.
Yeah, I don't know how I don't know if I like the fact that the Doctor grabs the Donna that makes sense in that situation, because it's a woman with a vegetable for a name is totally something weird that an alien would come up with, and because it just is totally something Donna would say.
Yeah.
But then to find out that was wrong, it was like, I like it when my Doctor's a little smarter than this. I mean, I get the cliffhanger heroics at the last minute, but still.
Well, and, I could kind of also chalk it up to him choosing the wrong one of, it's been 15 years since he spent time with Donna. And so he's kind of getting to know her again. Like
Yeah,
they're falling
that's
into
true.
their rhythm of what they used to know, but they've grown and changed so much, as this story has demonstrated, especially with the Doctor himself and some with Donna, that they're still getting to know each other again.
Mhm.
So
Well, they've both
that's
grown as
a large
people. Yeah.
yeah, so that's a large part of why I can kind of be okay with him choosing the wrong person.
Mhm.
Well, and because realistically, they chose the wrong person every single time
Mhm.
throughout the whole episode.
Almost, yeah.
You know,
Well,
so.
you're right, but you have to give them a little bit of credit that they chose the wrong people, but they always seem to get paired up, separated from the other with the wrong person. So it was very much you had to sort of piece it together and figure it out anyway. But you're right. There was a lot of times, and a lot of their conversations were great. One of the examples would have been when he says, she says, where am I from? Where was I born? And he guesses because he doesn't, even the Doctor doesn't know that backstory about where, her aunt and whatever her chaotic explanation of that ended up going. He didn't know that. She had never told him that, so it didn't matter which one he was. He didn't know that answer to that.
How am I supposed to know that?
So,
well, but they did kind of, when it was all four of them in a room together, before the final race to the cockpit again, they were pretty easily
in sync that
able
way.
to sync up and figure out who was the real versions of themselves.
Yes, which I applauded, because I thought you have to get there eventually.
Yeah, but the fact that there were so many times that they were not quite sure, and they were getting, it just shows the progress of these beings being able to replicate them very well too, and the threat that is to the universe. Although I have to say the motivations behind these beings of, we want to go cause havoc, it was a bit thin, but everything else about the story was so good I was willing to excuse it.
Well,
some people do just want to watch the world burn, and I'm okay with that.
But I think that they did a good job of saying that when they said we all of the hate and the war projected out to them, and that's what made them. And then Donna says, well, that's not all we are. And she says, well, then the other Donna says, well, the love letters don't carry as far. And I thought, okay, that's kind of enough for me to understand why they are the way they are. So I bought it.
Yeah, I liked that, and I was okay with that. I also really, once we get Donna back in the TARDIS at the end, and we kind of have our moment of reflection on dealing with Flux, and how she just quietly asks, "Are you okay?" "Oh, I will be." "When?" "In a million years." And he kind of gives her a number, and the impact of that, because it sounds flippant, and it sounds like it's a not answer, but yet knowing that he is a Time Lord and he is essentially immortal, and that he's at this point thousands of years old, well, possibly billions, depending on how you want to interpret the confession dial.
Or even before the confession dial, before he actually became the Doctor, who knows how old.
Yeah. Now that we've got that, a million years is still a long time.
Yeah.
This is something that's going to haunt him, and that he can say that and be semi-joking and flippant about it, but Donna knows that this is going to haunt him for a while.
Right.
That was a really cool moment too.
So, I'm really excited about next week, though. I'm really afraid of next week.
Yeah,
I'm really enjoying
these last two have been.
Yeah, and I'm really enjoying David Tennant and Catherine Tate again, and it's going to feel so short-lived by next week. I'm going to feel like that wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And they've done a very interesting thing with these coming one on top of another, that there will not really be an opportunity for Big Finish to come along and insert.
Yeah, right.
There's no wiggle room there.
No wiggle room. which maybe Russell T. Davies has orchestrated on purpose.
Which is a shame because I like 10. 10's been good, but I almost like 14 more because it feels like David Tennant knows a little bit more how to play the character, and maybe because it feels like he's also not the dialogue in this and the way his behavior is also demonstrated this is not 10.2. This is 14, and getting more than just 3 specials with 14, I feel like I would want that more than what we're getting.
Right.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Alison Fitz-Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
Well, Sean, that's going to be another easy one. What do we got coming up on the schedule?
The Giggle. That's it. That's all that's coming. No.
That's all we got. That's pretty much it next week.
All we need.
We'll be focused on that. So,
yeah, very much so. And then, of course, we get a week off from New Who, and then we return on Christmas with The Church on Rose Lane.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go back into the depression mode where there is no New Who on.
Hopefully that'll be short term, though.
Hopefully it'll be short term. And of course, we still have plenty of other things in the pipeline for you.
Yes.
So stay tuned.
All right. Of course, you can stay up to date on travelingthevortex.com. If you get any value out of this podcast, why not consider putting some value back into it? You can do that by clicking on the Patreon link and support us there. And also, please consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to this podcast. And make sure you join in on the conversations on our listeners forum on Facebook, on our Facebook page, on X, which is formerly Twitter, and also on TikTok and Instagram. And of course, we will again pose the question next week, what you thought, on our social media sites. So you can go there and let us know what you thought of the Giggle as well. Anything else before we close this program? If not, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing ya.
Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.
Direction Point! Direction Point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.